Hey everyone, this is James from TDB, bringing you another In-Betweenisode. Today, going to be talking about a tea that I own and I do drink, or at least I drink from this vendor quite often, and it is a WuyiOrigin tea. And you know, we bring WuyiOrigin teas onto the main episodes quite often, but I realized it'd been a bit since I had brought one onto In-Betweenisode, and I had actually just bought one of them. One of their teas this year, a big 250 gram bag of it. So I thought I would share that and share my impressions of the tea. This tea I did have a sample of, and then I ended up buying that bag with a couple of friends, both of who also bought 250 grams of it. So we've all kind of enjoyed the tea. So before I get into that, I wanted to talk a bit about kind of what I look at as far as Wuyi Oolongs and what I'm going for. I think the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the goal. And I buy Wuyi Oolongs that kind of fit into two different categories. So depending on which one it is, I might target a different tea. The first of which is just kind of something to fit into my regular drinker category. So I'm looking for something that is usually fairly price effective for Wuyi tea that's not necessarily as cheap as ripe tea. So I'm definitely willing to spend a little bit of money on that, even though it's intended more for regular drinking. The reason being that I think for a fairly decent quality Wuyi tea, you do need to be prepared to spend more than you would for a lot of different other teas. And the other goal is to have something that's really, really special. And for that, I'm certainly willing to spend over $1 a gram. I don't make those purchases very often, and kind of just when the opportunity presents itself, you'll buy just kind of a small quantity here or there. And the reason why I kind of make this distinction between these two different goals is that I don't always buy certain teas where I'm looking for something really special. I would say for the most part, for like a Taiwanese oolong, never really shoot for kind of that top tier end, ripe, same deal more or less, and very rarely for raw pour. But when it comes to maybe aged tea and Wuyi tea, if you can get something that's really, really kind of like for Wuyi tea in that inner area, really special material that's been processed well, then I do find that I will enjoy those teas quite a bit. So I do find that those teas can absolutely be worth it. This tea, on the other hand, clearly fits into the more of the regular, normal drinking category. So there's a few things that I kind of put on my list that I wanted to talk about that I think are important when you're kind of reading those descriptions of Wuyi teas and trying to decipher what you would like. First of which is roast level. Processing of Wuyi teas is very important and does kind of make a big difference on the end product in your cup. So figuring out whether you like a low-fired, mid-fired, high-fired roast. For me, I tend to like the mid to high-fired roast. And the other factor that is sort of in conjunction with that roast level that I think you need to take into consideration is age. The longer it has been since the roast, the more the roast will have mellowed out. Personally, I like mid to upper mid roasted teas that have been, have sat around for a year or two. So unlike greener teas, so green oolongs or green teas in general, age is, it's not bad. In fact, it might be preferred, in my opinion, to have a couple of years on those teas. So I'm perfectly willing to drink Wuyi Oolong that's 4, 5, 6 years old. So for me, fresh is not necessarily best in this case. The other thing to keep in account is varietal, just knowing which varietals you like. Rogueway tends to be a very aromatic, very forward thing. If you are, I think as a result of it being very nose forward, it can be very nice for beginners, but I think it's also just a solid varietal. So I mean, I will enjoy Rogueway tea. Shuixian, Lao Kong Shuixian is another one that I probably regularly buy, probably more so than Rogueway. And, that will vary too, but I think processing of these varietals there tends to be correlations with them too. That one tends to be processed where you can find like mid to high fired ones. So that's one that I will often go for. Lao Kong Shuixian is a little bit higher end. It just means older bushes compared to your standard Shuixians. So you'll all usually opt for that if that is an option. And then of course the origin, the inner Wuyi area will get very high prices in general, whereas the outer Wuyi area, you'll have kind of the more affordable teas. So those are kind of the different things to pay attention to when you're looking into these sorts of teas. So the tea I'm drinking today is actually interesting. It's a 2022 Dahongpao, so that's a year old. I think this is sort of in that mid-fired range, I would say. And Dahongpao, you can basically be buying two different types there. You could be buying one that's sort of a varietal that's close to kind of the origins, quote unquote. So that would be Beidou and Chidan are two that you would run into. Those tend to be a little more expensive. The one I bought here is a blend. So usually the Dahongpao blend is a mix of those two varietals that I just talked about, Shuixian and Rogue, which is one of the reasons I talked about them here. And I do love a good blend. I'm not someone that particularly demands that my teas be very specific origins or anything like that. So I think blend is a great way to kind of combine those two things. And so for me, I really like when the Wuyis have that rock taste, very heavy in minerals. I like the roast to be at a very certain level. I don't like it to be overly roasted. If the tea is just roasted to death and all you can taste is the roast, I don't particularly care for that. If it, on the other hand, has been roasted too light and it's more fragrance forward, I'm not a huge fan of that either. So for me, at least, it's about finding that correct balance that I really care for. Cheers. Yeah, from the get-go, it definitely has that balance that I love. It's pretty sweet. I think this is a tea that a lot of people would definitely enjoy. It definitely has kind of that rocky taste, heavy in the minerals, really tasty first steep. These are going to change pretty fast, steep in, steep out. The other thing to note about Wuyi tea, of course, is that it is quite sensitive to brewing. I personally like to use extra leaf when it comes to Wuyi, so usually I'm using something like 5 grams or maybe slightly under for like a raw pour in the same gaiwan. This gaiwan's about 75 milliliters. For Wuyi tea, I flip it, so I'm using closer to 5.5 or so. So maybe 10 to 20% more leaf than I normally would. And it really fills up the gaiwan. You can keep those steeps relatively short, in my opinion. That's totally fine. And just kind of extend the steeps as you need to. So I do think, it's something where you can get very dramatically different experiences if you're someone that, for instance, used half the amount of leaf I did and brewed it for longer. So I'm getting a little less fragrance in this one, but it's still very much in that kind of charcoaly category. Charcoaly, slightly woody, not particularly fruity. I'd say there is a little bit of fruitiness in it, but not overly so. Cheers. And unlike my ripe teas, which tend to be a little more constant steep in, steep out, these are the first two steeps here. And this tea, you can still taste the roastiness to it. I don't particularly mind it at this stage. I do think if I had this tea immediately after the roast, I don't know if I'd be a big fan. I think also kind of in that vein, the roasting level I think will kind of maintain it. So I will keep enjoying this tea 4 or 5 years from now. Usually how it works for WuyiOrigin is I will buy a decent sized bag of stuff, so 250 to 500 grams. I'll just slowly drink it throughout the years. So I'm almost through my Laochang Shuixian from a few years ago, and I actually still have a bag of Rogue and a bag of Dahongpao that I just bought, but I wanted to feature this one because I had just purchased it. So again, it's the 2022 Dahongpao blend. And just a really lovely combination of just flavor, aroma. It really is the whole package as far as that goes. Not a tea that I expect to steep out particularly long, but I will really enjoy it while it's here. And I like to steep these Wuyis so they're strong, but they don't really get bitter, so it's sort of at that edge. So unlike pu'er, where I will, pu'er, a lot of those raw pu'ers, the bitterness is sometimes definitely part of the taste profile that you're going for. If you're like to brew like a 10-year-old Dai tea, for instance, it would be, I think it would be suboptimal brewing if you brewed like a 7542 that's that age and you didn't get any bitterness. This, on the other hand, I don't think it needs to be bitter. So really nice color there. Dahongpao, for those of you that don't know, also means big red robe. One of the 4 famous bushes. All right, great color. Yeah, just really nice. Sort of tea that I think really has close to a 100% approval rating. There's just very few people that I feel like will not enjoy Wuyi type teas, provided they're introduced to the right one. Yeah, and so it's falling into that even more minerals and stuff like that. This tea is not particularly top noted. It does have some very nice sweetness, but beyond that, it's not super floral or anything like that. Mid-sized body, and yeah, in the end, I think this tea, I like it quite a bit, and it doesn't have necessarily overly like one single characteristic that you could really single out and like, oh, that's the really minerally tea, or that's the really like raspberry tea or something like that. Instead, I think this is a tea that just combines all the elements of Wuyi teas that I really like. So yeah, I would definitely recommend this tea. I forget exactly what it costs. I think might be around 50 cents a gram, maybe slightly less, I'm not sure. But either way, I would definitely recommend it as a pretty good example of a Wuyi tea. Don't expect this to be the best ever, because it's not, but I do think this is very solid and worth a buy if you are curious. All right, well, that just about wraps up this in-between-isode, so thank you to Cindy and the folks over at WuyiOrigin for continuously just providing good teas. They've been kind of, I don't drink through these Wuyi super fast, but I do drink them very regularly, so they've been one of the vendors that I have just consistently bought from pretty much since 2017, so about 6 years now. So thank you to the folks over there, and I will see y'all next time. Cheers.